The last human colony fell in 13 minutes. Not because its defenses were weak or its soldiers untrained, but because the enemy didn't come with weapons. They came with thoughts. The Verith didn't fire a single shot. Their ships hovered like silent gods over the colony sky, and then it began. Civilians froze mid-step. Pilots collapsed in their cockpits. Soldiers dropped their rifles as if they'd suddenly forgotten what war was. Their minds were no longer their own. Across every screen and broadcast channel, alien whispers threaded into human thoughts, twisting memories and rewriting loyalty with surgical precision. The colony governor shot himself before anyone could reach him. The resistance perimeter dissolved in less than an hour, and from the shadows of a derelict outpost orbiting a dead star, Commander Elias Reeve watched the footage with a hollow stare. His voice cracked over the resistance broadcast, cutting through static. "We are not winning. We are dreaming of survival now." The message was short, but its weight carried like a funeral bell. Around him, Bastion 7 hummed softly, a hidden asteroid fortress cloaked in electromagnetic noise. It was humanity's last sanctuary, and even here, there were no guarantees. Outside the viewport, the stars looked wrong. Too still, too quiet. Each passing day, the alien mind net grew stronger, stretching its invisible web across human-controlled systems, devouring every thought that wasn't shielded. It was like drowning in silence. People who'd been captured weren't tortured or enslaved. They were erased, turned into obedient shadows of themselves. Those who'd escaped whispered about seeing their friends smile one last time before pulling the trigger. The Verith didn't conquer planets. They rewrote reality. Reeve dragged a hand over his tired face, his reflection in the glass scarred and grey from sleepless nights. 13 minutes, he muttered, his breath fogging the viewport. "And we'll be next." His words were barely audible over the low hum of the station's reactors. But everyone aboard Bastion 7 already knew it. Supplies were dwindling. Communications were fractured. The enemy wasn't just outside. They were in every nightmare, every flicker of doubt, every trembling thought. In the dark corridors of Bastion 7, armed patrols moved in silence, boots clanging on cold steel as security drones floated above their heads. The station smelled of oil, ozone, and recycled air. Makeshift memorials lined the hallways, photos taped to bulkheads, names scratched into steel. For every face that smiled from those pictures, there were 3 more lost to the mind net. On the tactical deck, a holographic map pulsed red, marking every fallen colony. It was almost all of them now. Earth was silent. Mars was gone. Titan, Europa, the rings of Saturn, all silent. And now, the only human voices left came from a scattering of hidden outposts, whispering like ghosts in the void. Bastion 7 wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a coffin waiting for its lid to close. Somewhere deep inside, the whispers began again. The enemy mind net. The whispers weren't sound. They were pressure, like fingers sliding over the inside of your skull, rifling through memories that weren't theirs to take. Every survivor who'd felt it said the same thing. It was like drowning in someone else's thoughts. The Verith had perfected their weapon long before humanity knew their name. They called it the Mind Net, a lattice of psychic frequencies that synced with neural patterns, turning free will into programmable code. On Bastion 7's command deck, Dr. Sana Iqbal stood before a flickering display, her expression a mask of calm intellect over exhaustion. Holographs of captured humans flickered around her, glowing silhouettes of brains crisscrossed with alien filaments. "They don't control individuals," she said, voice sharp and precise. "They control populations. Every thought, every doubt, every fear becomes a thread in their hive. Once you're inside the net, you're no longer human. You're data. Commander Reeve paced behind her, his heavy boots echoing in the silent room. The station lights dimmed to red alert as another colony blinked off the map. So, they're not soldiers, he said. They're engineers. Engineers of the mind. Sana nodded grimly, tapping the screen to project a Virith overseer. The creature was horrifyingly still. 8 elongated limbs curled inward like a grotesque crown. Its head a translucent dome, glowing with pulses of thought. They don't fight wars, they write them. Every movement you make, every tactic you imagine, they see before you act. To them, strategy is predictable. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. The silence was broken by the metallic hiss of the door sliding open. Cade Mercer strode in, flight suit unzipped to his chest, his trademark smirk plastered over a face that hadn't seen proper sleep in weeks. "So what you're saying, Doc," he said, flopping into a chair, "is that we're all just characters in their story?" Sana shot him a look sharp enough to cut steel. "Number I'm saying, we're pawns in their equation." "Same difference," Cade muttered, spinning a knife idly between his fingers. Reeve slammed a hand onto the console. "Enough." His voice silenced the hum of conversation. "They've won every battle because they fight a war we can't even see. We can't outshoot them, outfly them, or outthink them. Not while they're living in our heads." He leaned forward, his shadow stretching across the glowing map. "So, we need something they can't predict." Sana's gaze shifted to a cluster of files on her console, labeled Project Mirage. Her fingers hovered over the access code, hesitating. The room's lights flickered again as alien whispers crept through the comm. Systems, fragments of voices, laughter, screams. The Virith weren't attacking. They were watching, listening. Reeve's voice dropped to a whisper. What do they fear? Sana finally entered the code, humanity's last refuge. Bastion 7 wasn't built to inspire hope. It was a hollowed-out asteroid from an abandoned mining operation, fortified in desperation and cloaked in radiation to mimic dead space. Its halls smelled of metal dust and ozone, and its walls were so thin in places that the sound of distant reactors thrummed like a heartbeat. Yet, for the last 30,000 uninfected humans, it was the closest thing to home. In the central hub, banners from a dozen fallen colonies hung like tattered ghosts, each one a reminder of what had been lost. Engineers worked tirelessly, their faces gaunt, skin pale from years without sunlight. Pilots huddled in mess halls, trading stories they didn't believe themselves. Bastion 7 wasn't a shining bastion of freedom. It was a pressure cooker, humanity compressed into one fragile sanctuary. And the Virith knew it existed. That knowledge burned in every sleepless night. Dr. Sana Iqbal stood at the observation deck, staring at the starfield beyond the reinforced glass. She'd been one of the first scientists to witness the MindNet's effects, and even now, the memory haunted her. Soldiers dropping their rifles mid-battle, officers calmly ordering their own execution, civilians kneeling in eerie synchrony. They don't just control us, she whispered to herself. They rewrite what it means to be us. Commander Reeve entered silently, his reflection appearing beside hers in the viewport. The man looked carved from stone, a soldier whose shoulders carried every fallen name. "We're running out of time," he said, voice like gravel. "Supplies are down to weeks. We can't hide forever." "That's why I started Mirage," Sana replied, her tone clipped. "We need something alien to them, something they can't process." Reeve raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about chaos." "I'm talking about imagination," she said. turning to meet his stare. Our unpredictability is the one thing they can't replicate. If we can weaponize that, we might stand a chance. At that moment, a low alarm blared through the station, shaking the walls. Reeves' hand shot to his sidearm out of instinct, but it wasn't a breach alarm. It was the proximity scanner. On the holo display, a crimson dot flickered at the edge of their system. Another one. Then a third. The Varith were probing their cloak, sending drones to test for weaknesses. Bastion 7 had been safe for 2 years, but that illusion was unraveling. Cade Mercer burst into the room, helmet tucked under his arm, a cocky grin masking his nerves. Scouts spotted in Sector Theta. They're getting close, real close. Reeve clenched his jaw. Then we move faster. Sana turned back to the stars, her eyes cold and resolute. Their mirage is no longer theory. The lights dimmed to combat red. In the depths of Bastion 7, teams of artists, scientists, and warriors gathered around neural pods, preparing to create something no alien hive could anticipate. Experiment 0. The neural pods hissed as their lids sealed shut, plunging their occupants into darkness. Inside, volunteers lay strapped and trembling, electrodes mapping every surge of thought, every flicker of emotion. They weren't soldiers or tacticians. They were dreamers, painters, poets, musicians, and lucid visionaries, chosen not for combat skill, but for their ability to imagine the impossible. The hum of machines filled the lab, punctuated by erratic heartbeats on monitors. Dr. Sana Iqbal moved through the room with quiet urgency, her gloved fingers dancing over the console. "Keep their minds stable," she ordered. "We push too far, and they won't come back." On the far side of the chamber, behind reinforced glass, a Varith overseer sat bound in a containment chair. Its elongated limbs twitched in restrained fury, and its crystalline dome glimmered with alien brainwaves. Its mouth, or what passed for one, remained closed, yet whispers filled the minds of every soldier stationed nearby. The creature was silent, but its thoughts weren't. Cade leaned against the glass, a bitter grin on his face. "I don't like being this close to it," he muttered. "Feels like it's inside me already." "It is," Sana replied curtly without looking up. But not for long. The experiment began. Neural signals from the dreamers were amplified and projected through an experimental device, sending raw imagination into the overseer's consciousness. On the screen, impossible visuals bloomed. A forest made of mirrors, bending in spirals, a sky bleeding colors no human eye should see, oceans curling into Mobius strips. The overseer's body convulsed violently, its psychic hum faltering for the first time since capture. Its glassy dome pulsed erratically, and a shrill sound, like metal, tearing reverberated in every mind present. Readings spiking, an engineer shouted, "It's losing coherence." Sana's expression hardened as she studied the data. "Good." The overseer began screeching, not aloud, but psychically. Soldiers doubled over as alien thoughts collided with theirs, fragments of panic and disbelief flooding their minds. The creature's composure shattered, its alien intellect unable to process the sheer chaos of human imagination. One soldier gasped, clutching his head. "It's afraid." For the first time since the war began, humans had made the enemy fear. But the victory was not without cost. One of the dreamers inside the neural pods began to seize violently, his mind fracturing under the intensity of projection. Another started screaming, describing visions of her own death playing endlessly in a loop. Technicians scrambled to shut down the system, pulling them out before they broke entirely. The overseer slumped in its restraints, whimpering like a wounded animal, its psychic dominance shattered. Sana exhaled sharply, a mix of triumph and dread twisting her features. "It works," she whispered. "We can fight them." Reeve, who'd been watching from the observation deck, leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Then it's time. We take this war to their minds." The first offensive, the first Mirage strike, began without ceremony, only tension. Bastion 7's launch bay was alive with organized chaos. Pilots strapping into battered starfighters, engineers rushing final calibrations, neural pods humming as dreamers prepared for another round of psychic warfare. The air reeked of ozone and adrenaline. Commander Reeve paced along the catwalk, his voice echoing over comms. "We're ghosts out there. No patterns, no predictability. Make them doubt every thought they have." In the center of the control deck, Sana stood over a flickering holographic map of the Voirith patrol sector. "We'll drop the Mirage payload here," she said, marking an enemy staging ground. "If this works, their hive won't be able to coordinate long enough to counterattack. If it fails..." Her words trailed off. The rest understood. There would be no survivors. The strike team moved out in silence, ships slipping through space like shadows, cloaked in static fields to evade detection. Cade Mercer piloted the lead fighter, his fingers drumming nervously against the console. His usual cocky grin was replaced with grim focus. "This is insane," he muttered into the comm. "But I'm starting to like insane." "Cut the chatter," Reeve's voice snapped. "Initiate Mirage." On Sana's command, neural amplifiers lit up. The dreamers inside their pods convulsed as waves of raw imagination surged through the fleet's systems. Beams of impossible light exploded from human ships. Not weapons, but psychic broadcasts. Visions of paradoxes, surreal landscapes, and concepts that defied alien logic. Voirith's ships staggered mid-maneuver, their sleek formations unraveling as pilots faltered, overwhelmed by visions of oceans burning upward, planets unraveling like threads, and creatures with faces that mirrored their own deepest fears. The hive's precision dissolved. Alien chatter flooded intercepted channels, a first in recorded history. Panic in the mind net. Targets disoriented, a gunner called out, lining up shots. Human fighters tore through the chaos, weapons blazing. For the first time in years, alien hulls shattered, their once invincible fleets crumbling. A Voirith destroyer exploded in silence, its wreckage spinning like glowing embers in the void. Cheers erupted over comms, even as pilots fought nausea from the psychic backlash. Inside the pods, the dreamers screamed. Blood trickled from one woman's nose as her mind painted worlds that never existed. One man's heart rate flatlined before medics revived him. The cost was staggering, but the battle was theirs. When the last Voirith cruiser retreated, limping away with its hive fractured, Bastion 7's comms filled with stunned disbelief. They had struck fear into an enemy that believed itself a god. Sana stared at the aftermath, her chest tight. "We've just told them we're dangerous." Reeve's reply was quiet, but heavy, "and they won't forgive us for it." Beyond the wreckage, alien reinforcements flickered into distant orbit, drawn by the psychic shockwave. Humanity had won their first victory, but the war had only truly begun. Counterstrike and betrayal. Victory lasted less than 2 days. The alien retaliation was silent, invisible, and devastating. At first, it seemed like a communications glitch, static bleeding into every frequency, whispers that made technicians clutch their heads. But then, soldiers started turning on each other without warning. A mechanic in the hangar slit his own throat with a welding torch before anyone could stop him. Pilots abandoned ships mid-flight, drifting into the void with peaceful smiles. It wasn't a weapon they could see. It was a psychic plague. Sana stood in the medbay, her hands trembling as she examined a soldier strapped to a bed, His eyes flickered like faulty lights, pupils dilating in unnatural rhythms. "It's a neural virus," she whispered. "They're rewriting us from the inside. A mirage hit them hard, so now they've adapted." The virus spread faster than anyone could contain. It wasn't infection in the biological sense, but psychic, an algorithm running through the mind net, slipping through cracks in unshielded thoughts. Within hours, Bastion 7's lower decks were sealed off, screams echoing behind blast doors. Reeve ordered full lockdown, his voice a low growl as he barked commands. "We're losing control. Secure every pod, every lab. This station doesn't fall." But it was already falling. Cade Mercer had vanished after the battle, his fighter returning to Bastion 7 on autopilot. The crew searched for hours, combing through security footage, until they found him strapped to a chair in a dim interrogation cell, pale and trembling. "Cade," Reeve barked, slamming a hand on the table. "Where were you?" I don't know," Cade stammered. His voice cracked, sweat dripping from his brow. "I remember the fight, then nothing." Sana entered, her eyes cold as she activated a scanner. The hologram revealed something buried deep inside his neural patterns, a beacon pulsing faintly, invisible to ordinary scans. She froze. "They tagged him," she said softly. "He's been broadcasting our location since the moment he landed." Cade's eyes widened in horror. "No, I didn't." Reeve's fist slammed against the wall, his rage filling the room like thunder. "They're coming. They played us." The realization spread like a cold wave. The Verith hadn't just adapted. They'd let the humans win that battle, baiting them into revealing Bastion 7's position. Outside, long-range sensors lit up with enemy signals, a fleet larger than any they'd ever seen. The asteroid fortress shook as the first wave entered the system, the mine net pressing in like an ocean of thought. Cade's voice broke as he whispered, "I'm sorry." Sana turned away, her expression unreadable. "Sorry doesn't matter now. We need to move." Red alert klaxons blared, drowning out the whispers flooding their minds. Bastion 7, humanity's last refuge, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a target painted in fire. The dream war. The attack began like a nightmare, bleeding into reality. One moment, Bastion 7 floated in its silent orbit, cloaked and hidden. The next, alien warships phased into existence, their hulls rippling like liquid metal under starlight. Entire fleets emerged in perfect formation, a wall of death surrounding the asteroid fortress. The mine net hit first, a psychic wave that made every soldier on the station clutch their heads and scream. Lights flickered, alarms blared. The Verith had come not just to destroy, but to dismantle humanity, thought by thought. Commander Reeves stood at the heart of the command deck, barking orders through the chaos. "Shields up, all fighters launch." His voice was steady, iron-willed, even as his nose bled from the psychic pressure. Outside the viewports, human starfighters streaked into the void like sparks against a tidal wave. In the neural lab, Sana Iqbal prepared the unthinkable. "We can't outgun them," she said into the comm, "so we take the fight to their overmind." Her hands moved with surgical precision, strapping herself into a neural pod. "Link me in, full immersion." "You won't come back," an engineer warned. "Then make sure I take them with me," she replied, her voice calm but heavy with resolve. The mind breakers, the dreamers who had survived Experiment Zero, joined her, plugging themselves into the system. Their bodies twitched violently as their minds were projected into the alien psychic realm. For the first time in history, humans stepped fully into the mind net. The world they entered wasn't space. It wasn't even physical. It was a realm of thought, a living architecture of alien intellect. The Overmind loomed above them, an entity so vast its form couldn't be comprehended, shifting endlessly between fractal shapes and colossal silhouettes. The dreamers gasped as they floated in a landscape where gravity didn't exist. Colors bled into sound, and their own memories flickered around them like shards of glass. Sana steadied herself, breathing deeply. Focus. Build something they can't understand. The humans began to create. Cities inverted, folding in on themselves like origami. Rivers flowed upward, turning into storm clouds of molten gold. Stars cracked like eggshells, birthing forests that sang in harmony. Every thought was a weapon, every dream a dagger. The Overmind recoiled as chaos flooded its pristine hive, its psychic voice a roar of static and rage. Reeve watched from the deck, sweat dripping down his face as enemy ships faltered, colliding into one another mid-flight. The mind breakers were tearing holes in the enemy's coordination, but the strain was brutal. Two dreamers flatlined, their minds shattered beyond repair. Sana gritted her teeth, blood dripping from her ears. We're close. Keep pushing. The alien fleet began to fracture, and for the first time, the Overmind trembled. Humanity was no longer prey. They were predators invading its mind. And this was only the beginning. Sacrifice on Bastion 7. The station groaned under the weight of the battle, raging beyond its hull. Bastion 7 had always felt fragile, but now it seemed moments from shattering entirely. Enemy fire hammered its shields, and entire decks flickered between light and darkness as power grids strained. Engineers worked frantically, sweat dripping down their faces as sparks rained from exposed wiring. Yet, amid the chaos, a new weapon was being prepared. A desperate gamble they called the singularity of thought. In the command center, Sana's voice crackled over the comm, strained and hoarse from the psychic duel she was waging within the mind net. We can't hold them off much longer. We need to release it. Commander Reeves' jaw clenched. We haven't even tested the payload. There's no time to test, Sana snapped. Her breathing was heavy, and every word sounded like it was being dragged out of her. We compress imagination itself into a singular point, unleash it inside the hive. It's the only way to collapse their network. The concept was madness, taking the raw chaos of human thought, the unpredictability of dreams, fear, hope, and creativity, and amplifying it to the point of becoming a psychic bomb. Even discussing it sent shivers through the room. But there was no other option. Cade Mercer stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. I'll take it. Reeves' head snapped toward him. You're not flying that thing. It's a one-way trip. Cade gave a lopsided grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. Exactly why I'm the right choice. You all need someone crazy enough to pull this off. He glanced at Sana's trembling form on the neural rig. You've done enough, Doc. Let me finish it. Silence hung heavy. The entire command deck seemed to hold its breath. Reeve finally nodded, his voice low. Load the payload. Get him a path. Minutes later, Cade sat in the cockpit of his battered starfighter, the singularity sealed in its cargo hold, a device glowing faintly with impossible colors that seemed to bend light around it. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the storm of enemy ships beyond. His comm crackled as Sana's voice reached him, quiet but steady. Cade, once you breach their hive, aim for the core signature. You'll know it when you see it. It'll feel alive. Copy that, he said softly, flicking switches, his hands steady now. For Bastion. For humanity, Reeves' voice rumbled over comms. The fighter roared into the void, weaving between alien fire. Cade's HUD lit up with warning after warning, but he didn't flinch. He cut through the chaos, streaking toward the center of the Vayrith fleet. A swarm of nightmares twisting around him. The singularity pulsed brighter, humming in resonance with his heartbeat. Inside Bastion 7, the crew watched in silence as his signal plunged deep into enemy lines, a lone spark against a wall of darkness. And then his voice came through the comm, calm and certain. Lighted up. The Overmind falls. The moment Cade breached the Vayrith core formation, the void itself seemed to ripple. The enemy fleet closed in, thousands of sleek vessels moving with hive precision. But Cade's fighter slipped through their ranks like a shadow. Warning klaxons screamed inside his cockpit, and his HUD lit up with enemy locks. But the psychic storm from the singularity distorted their targeting systems. Ships fired wildly, blasts missing by fractions as Cade's voice came through comms, calm but heavy with finality. I see it. The core. The Overmind loomed ahead, not a ship, not even a structure, but a pulsing sphere of light and shadow, tethered to psychic conduits that reached across the battlefield like glowing veins. It wasn't built. It was alive. Its presence was suffocating, a crushing gravity of thought that pressed against Cade's skull, whispering memories of his childhood, his mother's laughter, his worst fears. The voice of the hive coiled around him, smooth and seductive. You are alone, human. End this now. Surrender, and I will spare them. Cade chuckled bitterly, flipping a switch to arm the payload. You've already taken everything from us. On Bastion 7's command deck, Sana gripped the neural console, sweat running down her temples as she linked into Cade's feed. She gasped as she felt the Overmind's psychic presence, an intellect so vast it felt like an ocean staring back. But in that ocean, she sensed something new, fear. Do it, Cade, she whispered. He pushed his fighter into a full-speed dive toward the Overmind's psychic core. Enemy ships swarmed like hornets, their energy weapons flashing bright against the dark. But none could hit him. As Cade approached the glowing sphere, the singularity began to hum louder, vibrating through the hull, resonating with the Overmind itself. The alien entity shrieked, not in sound, but directly into every mind in the system. Soldiers on both sides clutched their heads as the psychic scream reverberated through the stars. Cade's voice came one last time, steady and clear. This is for all of us. He slammed his hand on the trigger. The singularity detonated. There was no explosion, not in the physical sense. Instead, light fractured reality. The psychic field erupted with the cascade of impossible visions, fractals splitting galaxies, storms of color beyond comprehension, memories from every human who had ever lived flashing in an instant. The Vayrith fleet convulsed in chaos, their formations collapsing as their neural link shattered. Ships crashed into one another, weapons misfiring as the hive mind screamed in disarray. Inside the mind net, Sana felt the Overmind breaking apart, its thoughts splintering like shattered glass. Humanity's imagination, the chaos, the beauty, the terror, was poison to the hive. The alien network imploded, its ships falling silent, drifting like husks through space. Cade's signal disappeared, replaced by a single flash of light brighter than a star. For the first time in years, the whispers stopped. Resolution and haunting, twist silence fell over the battlefield. For a moment, space itself felt hollow. The hum of alien ships gone. The oppressive pressure of the mind net evaporated. Bastion 7 floated in stunned quiet, its battered hull glowing faintly from enemy fire, but intact. On the command deck, no one spoke. Monitors flickered as data poured in. Enemy vessels drifting without power, their lights extinguished, their crews unresponsive. Entire fleets hung frozen in space like statues, lifeless and cold. Commander Reeves stood over the holomap, his hands trembling, jaw tight. Confirm. Is it over? An officer's voice cracked as they reported. The Varith fleet is offline. We did it, sir. The words barely sounded real. Sana staggered out of the neural lab, pale and shaking, blood staining her collar. She'd felt it happen. The overmind's collapse, its consciousness unraveling into static. But along with its death came echoes, alien memories flooding her mind. Flashes of towering crystal cities, galaxies burning under an unknown light, and a terror so vast even the Virith had fled from it. She clutched the console to steady herself. We didn't just kill them, she whispered. We killed something that was running. Reeve turned sharply. Running? From what? But she couldn't answer. The visions were too fractured, too immense to comprehend. What she knew for certain was chilling. Humanity hadn't been the only prey. The Varith had been hunted too. On the viewing deck, survivors gathered, staring at the battlefield. Human pilots returned, their ships scorched, carrying the weight of Cade Mercer's sacrifice. His fighter had become a starburst in the void, a beacon of defiance that would live in whispered legend. In the mess hall, rough hands etched his name into the steel wall of heroes, joining thousands of others who'd fallen. But for the first time, those names weren't memorials of defeat. They were proof that humanity could fight back. A transmission crackled across all channels. This is Bastion 7. We are free. The message echoed through the hidden human colonies, bringing cheers, sobs, and prayers. For the first time in years, Earth and her scattered children dared to hope. Yet Sana couldn't shake the final vision. The glimpse of a colossal eye opening in the abyss beyond known space. The Varith weren't gods, but refugees. And something far older, far hungrier, had been waiting in the dark. In Bastion 7's war room, Reeve stared out at the silent graveyard of alien ships. We've won a battle, he murmured, his voice carrying a quiet warning. But I don't think we've seen the real war yet. The camera would linger on the wreckage of the Varith Armada, then pan to a distant starfield where a shadow the size of a planet shifted. Its outline impossible to define. The screen would fade to black on a single haunting question whispered by Sana. If they feared us, what was it they feared more?